If you're watching this video, I'm guessing that you're a candidate to become a Haven certified bereavement doula, or you're someone who really wants to make sure that lost families in your community get the resources they need. In either case, I welcome you and I thank you for the work that you're putting in to caring for lost families. If you don't know me, my name is Dr. Abby Jorgensen. I am the founder and director of Haven Bereavement Doulas. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through our resource list that we require of our doulas for certification. It's a massive document. It's a requirement of 40 resources that you have on a list covering many different categories, and it can feel intimidating. A lot of doulas have told me this is the longest part of certification for them. It's not the training, it's not the books, it's this. It's working through finding all these resources in your community. One of the problems is sometimes they may not exist, right? So you have to go outside your community. You have to look online or you have to look 3 towns over to try to find the things that families may need. But I promise you, this endeavor is so worthwhile. So, in order to help you find those resources, I want to walk you through what they are and why they're so important to have on the resource list. I hope that this video is going to give you some energy to get through at least a couple more of those entries today, or to just power through the whole list. And I hope it also gives you some information about what to be looking for with some of these categories and why they're so important that we would include them in a Haven Bereavement Doula certification requirement. So let's get started with where should I find the resource list? So the link is in your certification portal. It's also here in the description of this video. What you're going to be able to do is create a copy of the Google spreadsheet called a Google Sheet that the amazing Julie McKay made of all of our resources. So when you open this link, it's going to automatically take you to a page asking you if you want to make a copy of the document. The caveat to this is if you use the bit.ly, it's going to be really suspicious of us and tell you that it's not going to take you there. So I'm going to show you right now what that looks like. Then you'll just have to click an extra button before you get to go look at the Google Sheet. So here we go. You're going to go to your internet browser and you're going to put in this link right here, bit.ly/Haven Resource List. Or you're going to click on the link that's below, either one, and that's going to take you potentially to this page asking you if you're really sure you trust us. If you do, go ahead and click that. And if you don't, I don't know why you're watching this video. Okay, so it's going to ask you, whichever link you clicked, copy document. Would you like to make a copy of Haven Bereavement Doula's resource list template? The answer is yes, make a copy. So that's going to force a copy into your own Google Drive of this amazing resource list template. So here you're going to be able to put in the different funeral homes. So you see we've got the type of resource here, the name of the resource, and so you can take out the number, right? We want you to have 2 funeral homes. So instead of 1, you'll put Crossroads Funeral Home or something like that. And then the location served. So this is going to be really helpful, especially if you're serving a broad area. To remember, oh, this one is on the east side of town, or this one serves Illinois but not Missouri, or things like that. Then we've also got a list for clients served. So this would be if there's a person who really specializes in a particular area or an organization that caters to specific people. So if there's some resource that's only available to people who have WIC, you would be able to say client served people who are eligible for WIC. Or if there's a funeral home that particularly cares for a Jewish population, you could write that down, that that's their emphasis, right? Then we've got website. We want you to be able to find their information quickly and their other contact information. So that might be if there's a phone number listed or an email address you've used or things like that. We've also got a category for other notes. So if you reached out to them to ask them a question, maybe write down emailed on 9/1/2025, haven't heard back yet, or something like that. Talk to someone who says they have scholarships for families who experience perinatal loss, right? Like these types of notes would be useful information to put there. So that's a little bit about how the spreadsheet is set up that way. Now let's talk through what the resources are that are on here and why we think they're so important. So we're going to start off with funeral homes. Funeral homes are important because some families want to use them for cremation services or for burial services. There are many places in the United States and in other countries where you're not allowed to have a burial in a cemetery without a funeral home, right? And so it can be really important to have those on the list for that reason. There are also places in the United States and in other countries where funeral homes need to be involved, especially after a certain number of weeks gestation, in the family procuring the remains of the little one from a medical facility. So in those cases, funeral homes are extra important, especially those that interface well with your local hospitals. Another thing to note about funeral homes is that there are questions often for families about what funeral services will cost. So you can ask funeral homes questions like, will you work with the hospital to get remains for the family? Will you do cremation or funeral services for a little one? Do you have appropriately sized coffins or urns for perinatal loss? Are there financial support opportunities that are available to the families, etc.? All right, next up, we've got bereavement photographer. So we want you to include at least two bereavement photographers who are near you on this list. And remember, you can contact non-bereavement photographers to satisfy this requirement, right? To see if they'll offer bereavement services. So oftentimes somebody who does bereavement services also does other kinds of photography, and they may really struggle to pitch that type of photography on the same page as they pitch their other services. So if they're typically newborn photographer and they also do bereavement photography, they may not even feature their bereavement photos on their website, right? You may not see a portfolio of that. So you may need to reach out to photographers. You may also need to reach out to different organizations. But I want to remind you that certain organizations have limitations on who they'll serve. So if you know of a massive organization, for example, that does fantastic work but only serves families after 22 weeks gestation, if you've taken the Haven training, you know who I'm talking about. That's a great organization to have on your resource list. That can't be the only bereavement photographer that you talk to, right? Because if you have a family who, like I did, is at 21 weeks and 5 days, they will not qualify for services and they still deserve a photographer. So that's why we want you to have at least two of those photographers. Make sure that at least one of them is going to serve families who have very early losses as well. All right, the next category is lactation resource. So we want you to make sure you've got at least two lactation resources that are grief informed. And remember, ideally you'll be able to find a lot more than that, but that's not always the case. Not all lactation consultants have loss training or have thought through how they would support a family through loss. One of the really important things we want to make sure is that we've got lactation resources that will support a family in stopping lactation, right? We've got so many great resources out there for families who want to continue lactation. We want to make sure that when a family decides that stopping is the right way for them to continue their grief journey, they have the support they need in that. So, lactation resources that are grief informed are going to support families in all of their choices. So, ideally, for lactation resources, you're going to be able to find a lactation consultant, maybe a milk bank that can accept donations of milk from bereaved families, maybe a resource for covering pumps. In different kinds of situations, families may not get access to pumps who would have otherwise. For example, here in the United States, in my context, insurance companies may only give you a pump when you're 28 weeks gestation or 32 weeks gestation or after your baby has been born. Make it make sense. I don't know. But what I want you to remember is that a resource that helps provide pumps to families might be really important to have as a lactation resource on your list. So those are four different ideas of lactation resources you could have on here. You're only required to have two, but remember you got to get to 40. So if you're really inspired by all four of those, go find all four of those and add them to the list. All right, next we've got grief support groups. So we want you to find at least four different options for grief support groups for your clients. We've pre-filled one in for you, which is the one that Julie and I run because it's free and available to all parents, not just one particular gender, who have experienced miscarriage, stillbirth, or infant loss, and it happens on Zoom. So that means it's really accessible to a lot of people who wouldn't be able to go in person because they have living children or their schedules don't allow. And it also invites everyone to come, not just mothers. But sometimes people want a mothers only group, or people want a group that's in person, or people want a group that's really intense and may even charge for people to participate in a long term, maybe weekly kinds of sessions that almost take the form of a class. So there's lots of different types of grief support groups out here, which is why we want you to find at least four of them to make sure you've got different options available to the families that you serve. I also want to highlight with grief support groups that you should keep an eye on whether they're perinatal loss specific or if they're broader than that. When groups are broader, they may not be as helpful. So if you find a grief support group at your local hospital that just says grief support, there may be a lot of people there who have lost their spouses or lost their parents or lost their older kids, and it may be hard for someone who's experienced a miscarriage, for example, to really feel at home or feel like they're getting what they need from that group. They may, so it's great to have them on the list, but do keep an eye on what percentage of your recommendations are perinatal loss specific and what are broader. A family may really be looking for something that's more specific, so make sure you've got plenty of those on your resource list. All right, next we've got a hospital with a cuddle cot or any of the other brands of this beautiful piece of technology that are available. So remember, we talked about this amazing bassinet in training that has a cooling system of water going through tubes to make sure that families can spend time with their little one's body. So I want you to see where the closest cuddle cot is in your area. And typically this is going to be at a hospital. This is the easiest way to find them. So I want you to just look primarily for a hospital with a cuddle cot. In case you want to know how you can do that, I wrote a script for you, so I'm going to read it to you. Call your local hospital's labor and delivery units. You can find the number online, or you can call the main menu and get sorted through to labor and delivery. Here's what I advise you to say. Hi, my name is Abby. I'm a local bereavement doula, and I am updating my resource list for families who experience a loss. I was wondering if you have a cuddle cot. All you got to say. And then thank whoever answers the phone for their time. Add the information about whether they have a cuddle cot or not to your resource list. And if they do have a cuddle cot, make sure that they fill this space. That's such a great resource for families to have. And then we want to make sure we know where we can send families in our community to take advantage of that resource. All right, next we've got spots for a therapist. We want you to find at least 2 local therapists. Ideally, these will have been trained in grief support. That doesn't necessarily always happen, right? Sometimes we don't have that available to us. But with the rise in virtual therapy, I think our chances are actually pretty good. You may even be able to find therapists who are specifically trained in perinatal loss, which is incredible if you can find that. Try to find therapists at different practices because they may be more or less likely to take insurance, which can be prohibitive for some people if they don't. If you find 2 therapists at the same practice, that's great, but then we want you to find some other practices too. Also, remember that therapy can happen online or it can happen in person. Remember that therapists may not be qualified in all areas. So I live about 12 minutes from a different state. I live on the border. And so some therapists may be able to serve my Missouri clients, but not my Illinois clients or things like that. Right. So keep in mind that there are lots of different therapy options that are available to people, and we want to make sure we have a good swath of those on our resource list. We're only requiring you to have 2, but therapists are a really easy resource to find more of quickly in a lot of situations. So I encourage you to do some digging on that and see what therapists in your area specialize in and which ones might be good additions to your list. All right, next we've got coffins and burial items. So here we want you to make a list of 3 places that clients could find coffins or burial items. These could be local, these could be online. I really do encourage you to find at least a couple local places like a funeral home or a woodworker who does custom pieces or things like that so that families can engage with the item as they decide to purchase it. Sometimes with online options, it can just feel very impersonal that you don't get to hold the item or you don't get to really see it in detail if you order it from Etsy or from some other kind of online shop. So I encourage you to try to find at least one local option that's available. Next, we've got a list of 3 different places that families can find burial gowns, tiny clothes, little garments. Oftentimes, when you're looking for these, you're actually looking for organizations that use donated wedding dresses or prom dresses to help families have some kind of beautiful garment for their little one to be buried in. So you might be looking for those, use those key terms as you search. And I really encourage you to try once again to find a local option and some online options because the closer you are to the place that creates these beautiful garments, the faster that garment will get there, which may be really important to families who need that soon. Then we get into having 3 different resources for someone who's experiencing domestic violence. And this is incredibly important for many reasons, but one of the main reasons is that we know domestic violence is the #1 killer of women between when they conceive and their child's first birthday. We don't have good statistics about what domestic violence rates look like when someone experiences a loss, but because of the added pressure, we wonder if it's higher, right? That would make sense. So we really want to make sure that we're well prepared to support a client who's experiencing domestic violence. I encourage you to try to find at least 2 local resources, especially a place where someone could go if they are not safe at home. But remember that there are also broader resources that are available. So, for example, in the United States and in many other countries, there's a hotline. So, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is a really great resource to have here. I strongly encourage you to add that if you're in the United States or serve people in the United States. That's thehotline.org. There are other domestic violence resources that may be available in your area that are broader. Those are great to have on this list as well, but do try to have at least one local resource. Next, we've got resources for those experiencing a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder. We want you to have at least three of these. So consider Postpartum Support International. They have a warm line, which means that you can call and leave a message and someone will call you back, usually within 24 hours, I think is what they have. That's a great resource for everyone. It's an international resource, so it's easily available for all of us. And they explicitly train their volunteers in grief support. So anyone who answers the phone at Postpartum Support International or who gives a call back has some level of grief training, which is fantastic. So that's one resource you could automatically put on there, the Postpartum Support International Warm Line. There are other resources that may be more specific to your area. Maybe you have a therapist who specializes in perinatal mood or anxiety disorders. Maybe there's a local support group. Maybe there's information online that you want to have available for your clients, or maybe you even have resources on your website. All of those kinds of things would count as resources for someone who has a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder. We do want to remember that not every bereaved parent will develop some kind of perinatal mood or anxiety disorder, but that the rates are a lot higher among bereaved parents than they are among parents whose children are born alive and survive their first year. So keep in mind that this is a pretty common resource for families to need. The next category is a backup bereavement doula. Who can you find in your area who can provide support or virtually if you can't find anyone in your area? This could be somebody who's your backup or somebody you refer to who becomes your backup. If you're still looking for a backup bereavement doula, check out the directory at havenbereavementdoulas.com. We've got amazing doulas there that you can connect to and maybe even form this kind of professional relationship with. This is important for your clients, right? So that you have a backup, you have another person for them, but it's also important for you so that you can take a break. You can be off call when you need to be. You cannot take a client who's not a good fit for you and refer them to someone else. Speaking of making sure you're all right, the next 5 entries all have to do with your self-care. So 5 resources you can rely on for your self-care. So this might include the Haven Doulas community. You know that you can reach out to me or to anyone at Haven Doulas and make sure that you've got support. You've got someone to talk to, who can listen as you process what you're going through, right? Next might be a therapist. Next might be a doula collective or a chaplaincy group or another profession-based organization where you can get support. Next might be a medical care provider who can help make sure that you are healthy as you do this work. Next might be a spouse, a partner, a best friend, a trusted loved one. Next might be someone who shares your religious or spiritual or philosophical views, who can have these tough conversations about why this happens with you. Next might be another bereavement doula. There's so many different places where you can find support. Maybe even a hobby is what goes on here, right? Whatever that is for your own self-care, I want you to make sure you've got at least 5 items on your resource list for your self-care. Okay, and then you'll notice we have here additional resources. You need 36 total, so you need to add 5 more in addition. They can be any of these categories, or they could be a whole other category. It is really up to you. So that's the list. It's really big, right? It is intimidating. I totally grant you that. But the needs that our clients have are varied. These are some of the common ones. The work that you do, putting effort into creating your resource list now, is just going to save you time for when someone needs that information in the future. I really do believe that if you do this work for any length of time, you're going to need most, if not all, of these resources. And knowing what's out there is incredibly helpful before your client needs you to know what's out there. So I really encourage you to take this a little bit at a time. I'm going to stop sharing so that you can't just see all of these lines in front of you. What I want you to do is take this in little chunks. Take one step, take one category, research it for 5 to 10 minutes. That's all you need to do. Maybe carve out 15 minutes every week. That'd be a massive commitment for what you actually need for this. But think of the steady progress that you could make if you committed 15 minutes a week. For some people, it's going to be easier to say, you know what, I'm scheduling 1 hour. I'm going to get this all done. You might be able to do that, which is awesome. But if you have to reach out to some of these people, like reaching out to someone who's a photographer to see if they'll do bereavement, remember that doing this in one sitting is probably not as feasible as you may want it to be. So you can get a lot done if you just tried to sit down and do it all. But I really do encourage you to schedule at least a couple times of doing that if that's what your plan is. And remember also that if you're struggling with any part of this resource list, you should feel free to reach out. Reach out to me, reach out to Haven. We will do our very best to make sure that you can get the resources that you need to have so that when a family asks you, you're ready. If you have any other questions as well, don't hesitate to reach out. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope it's also been encouraging. I know I just threw a lot at you. The resource list is a big hurdle, but it is also not just a hurdle, it's a way to help families over the hurdles they're going to experience. And that commitment to yourself of getting these resources now is going to pay dividends later. We're here to root you on and support you in doing that. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions.